Who is the most overrated person in history? My sister. I do stuff too, Mom. I feel this in my soul. Jesus Christ. She goes to one regional spelling bee, she didn't even get far, and it's all, what a bright young girl. But then when I start a rock collection it's, please stop showing me bits of the driveway, that's not a rock, that's a frog, who made you so goddamn weird, put that poor animal back. Spelling bees are Victorian contests where children go to cry. Rocks are the product of years' worth of geological processes. That's all I'm saying. Marsha face with rolling eyes. Tutankhamun, or King Tut as he is sometimes referred. He was a boy pharaoh that only reached the age of maybe 18, born from incest and suffered scoliosis, a bad foot, walked with a cane, and contracted malaria, and likely died from an infection from a broken leg. Also when he came to power married his sister and had 2 miscarriages. This poor boy had lots of power, but was sick all his life and likely his advisors made all decisions for him and eventually succeeded him. Also had a very short reign that ended with Egypt at war, they would lose under his successor. Sadly, the royal family in Egypt at that time frequently married their half-siblings. The last doc I saw on Tut theorized that he broke his foot in a chariot race. He's not remembered because he was a great ruler but because his pristine tomb was found. Tomb raiders have destroyed and stolen the contents of so many tombs that finding his tomb taught historians a great deal. So Tut wasn't the big deal, finding his intact tomb was. The reason we care so much about him is because of his incredibly well-preserved tomb. Besides his tomb, though, he was the son of Akhenaten, who was famous for believing in a single god. Under Tut, the pantheon was re-established by the priests who really had control for most of the young pharaoh's life. While he didn't do much, he actually does represent an important time in Egypt's history. Side note, while historians are fairly dubious about the Exodus occurring as described in the Bible, it's telling that Akhenaten was swayed by a monotheistic worldview at the time. Guy Fawkes. He was a minor cog in a conspiracy that he didn't even know all that much about. He was tasked with a dead simple objective, and he failed. He gave up the names of all the co-conspirators that he knew about, but most of them operated on a much higher level than this chump, so they got off mostly scot-free. He had one job and he fucked up 3, basically. He doesn't deserve the pages that his story is written on in history books. I 100% thought this said Guy Fieri and then I read the rest and thought I missed some huge news. Guy Fawkes Night, I still can't work out if most people are celebrating his attempt or his failure. In fairness, I can't blame him for snitching on his compatriots. They had time and lots of very pointy and/or hot instruments, and knowledge on how to keep someone alive quite a while with such things inserted in rude places. Your famous cuz of Alan Moore's 3rd best book. Long may Herb reign. Edit, not my opinion, that's a line from epic rap battles of history. Jack the Ripper. More overhyped, not overrated. But he only killed 5 people. It's not like he's the original Dexter. Yay, I really hate this story. Overtold, over-theorized. Only reason no one has pinpointed him was because it was in 1888 before crime investigation matured and they didn't have the technology. Everybody talks about Jack the Ripper. Nobody talks about the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. I personally don't think so. You have to understand that he was killing at a time the world was very different. Forensic science was just starting and widespread media was fairly adolescent. He had so many qualities that made him so famous. First, his name. Rarely has a serial killer name been so menacing or evil sounding. Next, the nature of his killings wasn't just straight up murders, but they were ritualistic and evil in nature. Next, his conversations with the press. He often sent taunting letters to the press and the police and was always steps ahead of them. This has been done by serial killers since, but he was the first to truly do it. And last but most important, he was never caught. They went through thousands of suspects and no one has ever been even close to figuring out who it was. It captures the imagination of everyone, much in the same way the D.B. Cooper mystery has. Yeah, people have killed more or in a worse manner, but no one captured the world's attention like old Jackie Boyd did in the late 1800s. In terms of serial killers, 5 people is still quite a few. Beyoncé. Her host, the wife of the owner of the Warriors, leans over her to ask Jays what he wants to drink. People see it, harass the woman to no end, and make it into a power moment for Beyoncé. Don't get me wrong, she's a great artist, but people act like she's a god. Edit, to everyone saying, it's not her, it's her fan base, would you kindly look up the definition of overrated? Her fans turn me off so much. I would like Beyoncé if it wasn't for her fans. She's talented, just not as much as her fans make her out to be. You say one semi-negative thing about her and the beehive loses their minds. Didn't she close off an entire hospital wing when she had her first baby? Her security goons wouldn't let a dad in who was there to see his wife and premature baby who happened to be on the same floor as her. Came here to say this. Her music and talent is extremely overrated. She's made some good career moves over the course of her life that have managed to keep her relevant though. Coco Chanel. I have recently only just found out she was apparently Nazi agent who went under the codename Westminster. She spent most of WW2 in Paris in the Ritz sleeping with Nazi officers and had direct contact to Himmler and Goebbels. She even insisted all Jewish directors of her brand be removed. Edit, I can't spell. Also the perfume smells weird. The current owners of Chanel are Jewish, so who got the last laugh? I think I read once that she used the anti-Jewish laws of the Vichy regime to force Jews who had bought some shares, part of the business, back. Ted Bundy. People claim that in terms of serial killers he had high intelligence. He didn't. He dropped out of law school because he couldn't keep up with his peers. So he was of average intelligence, he's just being compared with other serial killers who overall skew lower in terms of IQ. And no, his crimes weren't clever. He broke into the basement of a sorority house and bludgeoned 2 girls to death with a log from the fireplace while they were sleeping. The only reason he wasn't caught sooner was because the detectives working on the case were idiots and ignored multiple credible reports from Bundy's ex-wife. Stop romanticizing the guy. Outside of how nasty it is to hype up freaking serial killers, he, like all serial killers, was a gigantic turd sandwich. He wasn't smart, and his crimes weren't elegant or super planned out 4D chess murders. Don't believe the stupid dumb Netflix movie. Oh, and he admitted that after he tossed the bodies into a field because they were too badly decomposed to keep them in his house, he'd still go out there and sleep with them despite the fact that they were rotting and likely full of maggots and etc. Dude was sick. People need to stop romanticizing crime. Edit, for people picking apart the law school comment, what I said came directly from Ted Bundy's mouth in terms of the reason he dropped out. In August 1974, Bundy received a second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School and moved to Salt Lake City, leaving Klopfer in Seattle. While he called Klopfer often, he dated at least a dozen other women, 110, when he studied the first-year law curriculum a second time. He was devastated to find out that the other students had some intellectual capacity, that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. It was a great disappointment to me, he said. This came from Polly Nelson's book, and she was one of his lawyers. So if you have issues with my comment about him not keeping up with his peers, that comes straight from Ted himself. Double edit, to whomever gave me silver, thank you. Usually I respond to the gilding message with a thank you, but I got up to clean my fish tank and came back to like 60 comments, so I got a little overwhelmed. The Unabomber, that's your go-to insanely smart crazy person. I know the Netflix movie was not accurate. Ted Bundy romanticized himself. He didn't need to be romanticized because he did all of that on his own. He knew he was attractive and likable and he used that to his advantage. There were women fawning over him despite everything he was accused of, at the time. What I don't like, are people who say that Charles Manson was a genius. In no way, shape, or form was Charles Manson a genius, and his past interviews were just nonsensical bullshit that people read wayyyy too much into. Just to clarify, sleep with them despite the fact that they were rotting, like sleep or fuck sleep. Really gross either way. And that Netflix movie sucked ass. Pythagoras. He didn't make a squared plus b squared equals c squared at his own. One of the students did, he made it better and proved it. Edit, grammar. How could you make that any better? Did his student misspell one of the letters or something? Not to mention he was batshit crazy. He led a cult where he was worshipped like a god. Among their more interesting beliefs was to never eat beans as they were sacred, worshipping numbers as divine, and vows of silence. Then there's the infamous story of what he did when an acolyte proved the square root of 2 wasn't rational. Christopher Columbus. Edit, I'd like to thank the Academy for silver. 10 out of 10 would discover India again. List of accomplishments. The people who are naysaying this are confusing overrated with important. Columbus and his voyage weren't meaningless, but how they've been presented to many people makes it overrated. Mother Teresa. Learning about her misdeeds was really hard to reconcile with the image painted by popular media. She felt that suffering made her closer to Christ. Her facilities were often dens of, despite her having the resources to fund them with proper medical staff and equipment. I was still drinking my morning coffee when I typed this out. I think dens of speaks for itself though. Winking face. Mia Khalifa. Her thinking she's a big person in sports now is ridiculous. No one follows her for her sports opinion lol. So true. Mia Malkova exceeds Khalifa's abilities in all regards. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss huh? Waldo. Why should anyone even care to search for him, he's done nothing. The fact that he's always hiding is probably because he's done something wrong. Plus that fucker only has one shirt. Till Waldo is just a wandering homeless man. This whole thread can be summarized as surprise ending, nobody is perfect. Nobody's perfect. Except for Bob Ross, Fred Rogers, Steve Irwin, and Keanu. Mother Teresa believed the suffering of the poor was beautiful. She also let the sick people she helped go without medicine to bring them closer to God. Different story when she became sick though. Ioannis Metaxas. He was the leader of Greece from 1936 to 1941. Most famous for not surrendering to fascist Italy during WW2. The only problem is that Metaxas was a fascist dictator himself. Yes, but he was our fascist dictator. I thought he was the founder of Iowa and Texas. I'm gonna have to go with Hitler. His paintings really weren't that great. Hitler could have become a great flower painter but he chose the easy path. Ken M. Not the most overrated but first guy that comes to mind is America's only Paul Revere. Don't get me wrong, yes he was a good guy and he played a role in our nation's fate that night. But did you know he wasn't the only man on the midnight ride? A lot of the work and credit goes to his two peers that night. Revere only gets the credit because his name rhymed nicely in the poem written about him. I only know this because my grandma pointed out that we're related to one of the other two men, William Dawes. I'm too lazy to look up the other guy's name or how much of a role each of the three played in the event, but my basic memory tells me Revere wasn't the most critical player of the three. In fact, and I could be wrong, he got caught before he finished his role which led the real heroism to one of the other two. So yeah, thanks Paul Revere, but let's give credit to the other guys who warned us of the British that night. We can't all have nice-sounding names, though, so your name is remembered while the other two have been forgotten by most, other than historians and nerds. ETA, I didn't expect this to be seen or for it to get all this attention. Not replying to everyone but there's some good history facts in here and I'm learning some things about him and others. US history, especially with regards to war, isn't my top interest. I'm liking the conversation and seeing some healthy debate. Sorry if I sounded undereducated on this topic as I don't know it in great detail. This is Reddit, this is my opinion, and that was mostly detail from what I learned in K-12 school but I'm done with my bachelor's now and K-12 was a long time ago. Also, this may be my top comment ever so thank you everyone for the karma, but mostly the interesting facts and conversation here. I just had 100 plus notifications in my inbox yesterday and thought I marked them all as read so I was really confused seeing all of this. 2 comments in 2 days hitting 6K plus karma. I just had a crummy night at the laundry mat so thank you for making that a little bit better. Samuel Prescott. Israel Bissell. Sybil Luddington. Lajos fucking Kossuth. He's a Hungarian history figure who lived 1802 to 1894, but most notably he declared himself as governor-president of the Kingdom of Hungary during the 1848–49 revolution. For those of you who are not really familiar with Hungarian history, the short variant is, we were fucked by everyone and never had independence since the early 1300s. This time we had beef with the Habsburgs. We really wanted independence, have Hungarian as the official language and the liberation of the serfdom. Sounds cool. Before the revolution the two most outstanding political figures were Kossuth and Count István Széchenyi. He's actually a really cool dude, and I think he deserved the title, the greatest Hungarian. They both wanted the same things but Kossuth wanted everything ASAP, while Széchenyi understood that change takes time. So of course they didn't like each other. With some other factors Kossuth ended up bullying Széchenyi out of politics. I give Kossuth the credit for being smart and charismatic, who could motivate people with his speeches. So one time he basically started a rally amongst common folk, because other politicians told him that discrowning the king was a bad effing idea. But because of the massive amount of people surrounding them, they couldn't really say no. So they did discrown the king. During the revolution we sucked ass. Not getting into details, we had more downs than ups. Also some minorities revolted against Kossuth, who would not give them any rights. Enter one of my favorite historical figure, Artur Görgey. He was the greatest general in this whole scene. And finally he has his own exhibition. He actually won against some Austrian army corps. Kossuth hated him most likely because he feared his power and did everything to remove him from charge. But the Austrian king, Ferdinand V, asked the Russian emperor, Nicholas I, for help. So, Hungary is a small country with a small population, Russia on the other hand. You see where this is going. George wanted to go west and destroy the Austrian army, before the Russians arrive. Otherwise we're fucked. Sounds great. Not for Kossuth. He wanted to wait until the two armies merge in the east because if they lose, he can emigrate to Turkey. The latter happened, and Kossuth as his loss fucking move, stepped back from being governor-president and appointed George. A few days later on August 13, it was clear that Hungary had lost. In a hopeless situation, George signed a surrender at Vilagos. Kossuth emigrated to Turkey, but tried to control everything from afar. Writing the Cassandra letter, that if we make peace with the Austrians Hungary will no longer exist. Which was bullshit. Our industry and agriculture fucking blossomed after. As a really great university professor once said, Kossuth threw a big rock up in the air and pushed George under it. Basically he threw him under the bus. What baffles me about this absolutely garbage of a person, that he has the biggest mausoleum in all of Hungary. It's made out of gold, marble and all that jazz. You know what George has? A black iron cross. God, I hate him so much. By the way, he died in Italy, and he still has a huge following because he was so great that every fucking town has to have at least one road named after him. Edit, thank you for the silver kind stranger. Edit 2, change the swear words. Edit 3, thank you for all the response I got. I didn't expect it to blow up. Thank you for the gold, platinum, everything. TLDR, Lajos Kossuth is a charismatic politician, becomes governor-president of Hungary during a revolution, his plan fucks the whole nation, leaves everyone to deal with what he caused by running away to Turkey, acted like a know-it-all until he died. Now has a huge following as the nation's hero, but he's basically an asshole. I love this. I don't need drunk history, I need angry ranting history. Thanks for the education and entertainment. Thomas Edison. Let's be real here. Who isn't overrated? Newton. That guy was the last man on Earth who knew everything on the different fields of science from his time. Most of the time Newton is underrated when people only associate gravity to his name. Edit, rip my inbox. Euler. Fucking madlad lost vision in one of his eyes due to the strain of his work, yet he continued. He continued until he were no longer able to see on his other eye. Now that's some dedication. Remember, sort by controversial for the real answers. Edit, since a lot of people are commenting this, it wasn't just Keanu, Obama, Trump, and Jesus when I originally made the comment, but they were there. Edit, coincidentally, I think those are also the answer to, who do you think will make an appearance in the next Bill and Ted movie? This thread was wholesome and educational until I did this. John Lennon. Don't hurt me, I'm a big Beatles fan, but somebody had to say it. Edit, not the most overrated in history but still somewhat overrated. George was the true genius. Ronald Reagan. He was always a popular president, but he has since been recast, mainly by conservative historians, as a great one as well. Yes, you can easily place him on that pedestal. You would merely need to ignore the Iran-Contra scandal, the huge budget deficits, his environment ignorance, his do-nothing reaction to the looming AIDS epidemic, his courting of Saddam Hussein, and numerous other blunders. And he didn't win the Cold War. The war in Afghanistan started in 1979. Reagan was still in California. Don't forget the failed war on drugs that led to mass incarceration and had zero impact on drug use. Reagan was actually a major fuck-up, but he had a penchant for dropping pretty speeches on occasion and he was nice, so people forget that his policies continue to haunt the US to this day. P.S. He even backtracked on his tax cuts before he left office because he realized that they simply don't work. Edit, I know Nixon started the war on drugs, but Reagan threw gas on the fire. This caused the prison population to explode, which hit black and brown communities especially hard. I read a Rolling Stone article a number of years ago that traced the beginning of the explosion in the cost of college tuition to Reagan's time as California governor. Apparently, he started a public campaign to recast college as a benefit to the student rather than a benefit to society so he could cut public funding to the UC system. Before that, college was mostly funded by the public and very affordable. Others followed his lead and college tuition predictably has risen to the ludicrous level it is at today while state support for students has gone the other way. So we can blame a lot of the student loan crisis on Reagan too. Erwin Schrödinger, he is both overrated and underrated simultaneously. As for Heisenberg, I'm still uncertain. Mao. 500 points have been deducted from your social credit for this comment. You are no longer authorized to wear shoes in the subway train. Stalin. Literally a mass murder, still hailed to this day by a majority of Russians and many other dumbass communists around the world. Most people that talk about Stalin have no idea what they're talking about. To quote my coworker, "There is no system of government better at killing communists than communism." Steve Jobs. He's overrated, because people think he was a great inventor or something, and he wasn't. But he's underrated too, because he was Apple's filter to stop horrible designs from getting out in the world, and Apple doesn't have one of those anymore. Software companies need a jerk. Jobs killed projects at Apple that were garbage. Now there's nobody like him left, and so we got the iOS Podcasts app, which was designed by morons. There needed to be some jerk at Apple with authority to say, "That's garbage, you can't ship it, fix it." As more and more Apple stuff gets rewritten, it's only going to get continually worse. Henry VIII. Let's be honest, all he did was strong-arm the church so he could marry another woman, the fat greedy sod. Do people consider him a good king? A lot of people know about him because he's the most recognizable British monarch aside from the Queen due to his penchant for divorce and splitting Catholicism again, but I never got the impression that people idolized him or anything. Garfield. We all hate Mondays, you ain't special. Kim Kardashian. You know what's weird though? The only time I see anything about her is online. I've never had a conversation or heard anyone talk about the Kardashians in real life. I wouldn't know who she was if it wasn't for Reddit. So is she overrated? Maybe. But I think most people just don't care enough to rate her. Overrated in what way exactly? I'm not a huge Kardashian fan, but leveraging a few industry connections plus a sex tape into a billion-plus value brand and providing a catalyst for underlying changes in Western beauty and fashion that will likely end up a hallmark of the 2010s seems like kinda a big deal. Plus drawing attention to high-profile prison reform sentencing work. Out of the heaps of detritus that get way too much attention in 2019, I think Kim gets kinda a bad rap. Douglas MacArthur. Was obsessed with his legacy while being a far less capable leader than many of the other overlooked commanders in the Pacific Theater. He spent thousands of lives in battles on islands that had little strategic significance, declared the battle for the Philippines over while intense fighting raged on, and was disliked by many serving under him. Go read Max Hastings' Retribution, The Battle for Japan for a great deep dive into the Pacific War. Added over. My grandpa had a story about MacArthur. He didn't like him very much. So Grandpa was stationed somewhere in the Philippines and MacArthur was scheduled to spend an extended visit at their base. Now, MacArthur traveled everywhere with a full-size refrigerator, apparently. Have you ever tried to lift a 1940s refrigerator? They are heavy as shit. So Grandpa's platoon gets assigned to fridge duty. They haul it off the boat, and up this giant hill where MacArthur was to be staying. No sooner do they get it up the hill than they get word that there's a possible air raid incoming, and the general needs to be evacuated to a facility at the bottom of the hill. And where MacArthur goes, so goes his fridge. Back down the hill they go. But then the air raid is a false alarm, and MacArthur goes back up the hill. Back up the hill they go. According to Grandpa, this happened a good 3 to 4 times during this one visit. So when MacArthur made that famous speech about "I shall return" to the Philippines, Grandpa's response was, "I sure as hell hope not." XXXTentacion. Strong influence in music plus killed equals heaven taking our angel back early. When really he was an abusive cunt that while didn't deserve to be killed for his actions, as very few people do, he certainly had it coming. I once read somewhere, that in the future, he'll be looked at in the same way as Tupac was. I just don't see it. Che Guevara. Horrible person that somehow became a symbol of rebellion and freedom. You're gonna piss off some middle-class white college kids experiencing freedom for the first time with that answer. Woodrow Wilson. Gandhi. Are you sure? His words are backed with nuclear weapons. Amelia Earhart. There were plenty of trailblazing and better women pilots, yet Amelia is a household name because she attempted something she died while trying. The part that made her famous was the question of, did she die? Keanu Reeves. Like yeah, he's a nice guy and all, but Reddit is just absolutely obsessing over him. Hillary Clinton. Now before you go all nuts on me, hear me out. Never before has a feminist ridden the coattails of their husband the way Hillary Clinton has. She moved from Arkansas to D.C., then to NY and 6 months later was a senator from there. Come on. She was horrific to Barack in the primaries in 2008, why he gave her a job, I'll never know, and was entitled to the nomination in 2016. Hillary is no dummy, but if not for Bill, she would be a real estate attorney back in Little Rock. Elon Musk. JF Kennedy. He is considered to be one of the best presidents, but during his presidency he didn't accomplish a lot. Maybe that's because his term was relatively short, but anyway he is in the history mainly because of his death. Edit, JFK wasn't bad per se. He did some controversial stuff and did something good. But he wasn't most productive president in history, and this topic isn't about being good or bad, it's about being overrated. Deleted. Cardi B. Barack Obama. He received a Nobel Prize and is widely respected and admired, but if you really look at what he accomplished, it's pretty lackluster. Bill Clinton. Turns out he was just 15 years early enough to avoid the Me Too movement. Also, a lot of the laws and executive order he signed led to the 2007 collapse, and he is primarily to blame for the high minority incarceration rate.